I used to live in a little mountain place called Granite Hollow, Colorado. Population maybe 500 on a good day. It's one of those towns built on logging and old secrets. Everyone pretends they don't notice the weird stuff because pretending is easier. The story I'm about to tell happened in '97. It started with a sound, not a scream, not an animal, just this dull thudding that came from the woods after midnight. Every night, same time. You could feel it through the floorboards. My dad said it was logging work or hunters setting up blinds, but no one cut wood that far up the ridge anymore. The old trail past the creek had been closed since before I was born. I didn't think much of it until my friend Chris and I found footprints in the mud behind my house. Bare, human, and too big for either of us. They led straight into the forest. We waited until Friday to check it out. Packed some snacks, flashlights, said we were camping. We didn't bring a tent. Figured we'd make a fire, hang out, maybe prove to ourselves it was nothing. The deeper we went, the quieter it got. The pine trees up there grow so close that the wind barely moves them. The ground was soft, covered in old needles that muffled every step. By the time we reached the ridge, the sun was already gone. That's when we heard the pounding again, steady, like a heartbeat. We followed it, just stupid kids thinking we'd find a bear or something. We came to a clearing. In the middle of it was a circle, stones arranged perfectly, about 10 feet wide. Inside were branches tied together with twine, forming shapes I didn't recognize. And right in the center, a tree stump blackened, like it had been burned a long time ago. Chris was the first to speak. "Man, this is a church thing," he said. But he didn't sound convinced. Then we heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from the tree line behind us. I remember the flashlight shaking in my hand as I turned. There were figures, maybe 5 or 6, all wearing the same thing, long coats, faces hidden under dark hoods. No one spoke. They just watched us. Then one of them raised something, a stick maybe, and tapped it twice against the ground. That same pounding sound echoed from somewhere deeper in the woods. We didn't wait. We ran. I don't think I've ever sprinted that hard in my life. We didn't stop until we hit the main road, our lungs burning. We never told anyone what we saw. Chris moved away the next year. I did too after graduation. But last winter, I drove through Granite Hollow again on my way to Denver. The road that runs past the old forest was still there, and for some reason, I pulled over. The pines looked the same, dark, motionless, too quiet. And for just a second, I saw something flicker between the trees, a faint orange glow like a campfire burning low. Then came that same low, heavy thud, echoing up from the valley. I got back in my car and didn't stop driving until I was miles away. Whatever's out there, it's still practicing. I don't really talk about this anymore, mostly because folks look at you funny when you bring it up. But I swear on everything I have, what I saw that summer out by Cold Creek Bridge wasn't normal. I was 17 at the time, working evenings at my uncle's gas station outside of town. Cold Creek's one of those nowhere places in northern Arkansas. Flat land, 2 roads, a diner that still had a jukebox in '98. Most nights were quiet. That one wasn't. It started when my buddy Mason stopped by just before closing. He was pale and jittery. Said I needed to come see something crazy out past the quarry. I figured he'd been drinking, but he wouldn't let it go, so after work I drove him out there. The road past the quarry turns to gravel and dead ends near an old wooden bridge. Folks say the river under it dried up years ago, but it still smells like wet earth. We parked and just listened, the kind of stillness that messes with your head. No bugs, no wind, nothing. Then Mason pointed. Across the field, floating just above the fog, were 3 pale lights. They weren't headlights or lanterns, too white, too smooth. They didn't blink or move, they just hung there. We watched them for maybe a minute before one shimmered and split in two, like it was peeling itself apart. The others did the same, until there were 6 of them, drifting closer, slow and quiet. That's when the air changed. My ears popped like we'd gone underwater. Mason grabbed my arm and whispered, "We need to go, right now." And then, nothing. Every light winked out. Sound rushed back in all at once. It was like someone hit play on the world again. We got out of there fast, laughing it off, but we both knew it wasn't normal. 3 nights later, Mason didn't show up to school. His truck was found near that same bridge, engine still running, door open. They searched the woods, the fields, even drained part of the creek bed. All they found was his phone, cracked, still recording. One of the deputies told me later the video was mostly dark, but near the end you could hear Mason whisper, "It's above me," before it cut out. People still see the lights sometimes, always in summer, always near the fog. Old-timers say it's swamp gas. Others say it's something buried in the mine tunnels under town, some chemical that glows. My granddad had another idea. He told me back in the 40s, miners broke into a chamber under the quarry, something that hummed and glowed. The company sealed it up and left town a week later. I didn't believe him back then, but every time I drive through Cold Creek, I can't help glancing toward that field. And once, just once, I thought I saw them again, hanging there over the grass, perfectly still, like they'd been waiting for someone to come back. I grew up in a small town in Louisiana, not the kind you see on postcards. Our place was a patchwork of cracked roads, overgrown lots, and churches that doubled as community centers. Everyone knew everyone, or at least knew someone who knew you. The kind of place where secrets didn't stay buried for long, unless they were buried deep enough. Back in the summer of 1998, I was 17, about to start my senior year. Most of my nights were spent with my 2 closest friends, Kyle and Eric. We didn't have malls or movie theaters nearby, so we just drive around the back roads, smoke cheap cigarettes, and talk about leaving town one day. That's how we ended up finding the Crossroads house. It was a humid July night, the kind where the air feels thick like breathing through wet cloth. Kyle was driving his old Chevy, music playing low from a mixtape we'd worn out months ago. We'd been heading toward Bayou Ridge, just past the old railway tracks, when Eric said he knew a shortcut that cut through a part of town none of us had ever driven before. He'd heard about it from his cousin, said there was an abandoned house at the end of an unmarked road. Locals called it the Crossroads House. Apparently, people used to say strange things happened there. Lights in the windows when no one lived there, voices when the wind was still. But like every good Southern ghost story, no one ever proved anything. It was just a story. Or so we thought. We turned off the main road onto a narrow path that barely counted as asphalt. The trees closed in almost immediately, branches arching overhead, blocking out the moonlight. Kyle flicked on the high beams, and for a second, I thought I saw something move in the ditch, like a person crouched low. But when I looked again, there was nothing. Probably a raccoon, Kyle muttered, but I could tell he saw it too. The road split ahead, a rough T-shaped junction with no signs. The dirt here was lighter, almost gray. The intersection looked like it had been scorched once, maybe from a lightning strike or something worse. Eric pointed left, that way. It's right past the old crossroad. We all laughed when he said it, like it was fate. 3 bored teenagers, a place called the Crossroads House, and a night with nothing else to do. We found the house maybe a mile down that dirt path. It was 2 stories, colonial style, with the kind of front porch that sagged under its own weight. The windows were boarded from the inside, but light leaked through the cracks, faint, golden light, like candle glow. There were no other houses around, no signs of power lines, just this one structure in the middle of nowhere, standing quiet under the weight of the swamp air. Kyle cut the engine, and we sat there for a moment, windows down, listening. The only sound was cicadas, a deafening chorus that seemed to grow louder the longer we waited. Then, without warning, it stopped. Every insect went silent. You don't realize how much you rely on background noise until it's gone. That silence hit like a punch. "Y'all hear that?" Eric whispered. We nodded. And then, faintly, from the second floor, came the sound of a door closing. We got out of the car. The gravel crunched under our shoes, too loud, like it was echoing. Kyle had a flashlight on his keychain, but the beam was weak, barely cutting through the dark. When we stepped under the porch, the boards gave way with soft creaks. There was a smell, not rot exactly, but something old, damp wood and something faintly sweet, like lilacs left too long in water. The front door was half open. Inside, we could see that warm, flickering light, like a candle. Eric went first, pushing the door wider. "Hello?" he called out, trying to sound casual. No answer. We stepped inside. The air was heavier there. Dust hung thick in the beam of the flashlight, and everything was coated in it. Furniture, picture frames, a broken clock on the wall stopped at 3:17. There were muddy footprints on the floor, leading from the door to the staircase. But here's the thing. They didn't lead back out. We followed them, of course. Teenagers are idiots. At the top of the stairs was a long hallway with 5 doors, 3 on one side, 2 on the other. The footprints went straight to the one at the end, where the light was coming from underneath. When we got closer, the air got colder. I could actually see my breath. In July. Kyle reached for the doorknob, but before he could touch it, the light went out. I swear to God, none of us moved for a good 10 seconds. Then Eric whispered, "Let's just go, man." But Kyle, he was always the stubborn one, grabbed the knob anyway. It was cold, like metal left in ice water. The door creaked open, and inside was nothing but an empty room. No light, no candle, just bare wooden floorboards and a single chair facing the window. The footprints stopped halfway inside. That's when we heard it, from downstairs this time, the front door slamming shut. Kyle ran to the window, trying to see if someone had followed us, but the glass was too dusty. I ran to the top of the stairs and froze. There was a shape standing at the bottom. It looked like a person, maybe a woman, tall, thin, wearing what looked like a pale dress or nightgown. I couldn't see her face. Her hair hung forward, long and dark. She wasn't moving, just standing there, hands at her sides. I whispered Kyle's name, but he didn't answer. When I turned back to look at him, the woman was gone. We tore out of that house like hell was behind us. I don't remember hitting the stairs. I don't remember opening the front door. But I remember the sound, like someone running right behind me, bare feet slapping the wood. We dove into the car, slammed the doors, and Kyle floored it. The tires spun on gravel before catching. I looked out the back window and saw that the front door of the house was open again. A faint light flickered inside like before. But now, standing just outside the door, was that same woman. And she was watching us leave. We didn't stop driving until we hit the highway again. None of us said anything for a long time. Kyle's hands were shaking on the wheel. Eric kept turning to look behind us like she might have followed. When we finally reached town, we pulled into the gas station and sat there under the bright fluorescent lights for nearly half an hour. That's when Kyle noticed something on his shirt. A small, perfect handprint near his shoulder, like someone had grabbed him. It wasn't dirt. It looked more like ash. We went back in daylight the next day. Or at least we tried to. The road we'd taken, the dirt one past the crossroads, wasn't there. We drove up and down that stretch of highway for hours. Same turns, same landmarks, no road. Eventually, we stopped at the old general store near Bayou Ridge and asked the guy behind the counter if he knew about a place called the Crossroads House. He froze, then said that place burned down back in '78. Whole family died inside. We told him we'd seen it just the night before, lights and all. He just stared at us. Then he said something I'll never forget. "Son, if you saw a light out there, you best be glad you didn't stop twice." We never found that road again. A few years later, I left Louisiana for good. Kyle joined the Army. Eric stayed behind. Sometimes we talk about that night, and every time the details shift a little, like the memories warping. But one thing never changes. We all saw her. And sometimes, when I can't sleep, I'll think about that faint smell of lilacs and the way the cicadas went quiet all at once. I'll wonder if she remembers us, or if she's still waiting at the crossroads. I grew up in a small town in southern Ohio, population just under 3,000. The kind of place where everyone waves when you drive by and gossip travels faster than news. There's a stretch of road just outside of town called Old Mill Road, and at the end of it sits an abandoned railway bridge, steel and rust, spanning a narrow creek. The bridge hasn't been used in decades, but kids still go there to smoke or dare each other to walk across. Locals say it's haunted by the man by the bridge. Supposedly, he was a railroad worker killed there in the 1950s when a support beam collapsed. People say if you cross the bridge after midnight, he appears behind you, just standing still, watching. I never believed in that stuff, until one night in 2003. It was late September, the kind of crisp night where fog clings low over the fields. I was 16, driving my dad's old pickup with my friend Melissa in the passenger seat. We weren't dating exactly, but there was something there. You know how it is at that age. We'd gone out to the diner and decided to take the long way home, through Old Mill Road. The moon was bright, and the fog looked like smoke curling across the pavement. When we reached the bridge, Melissa dared me to park. "Come on," she said, grinning. "You're not scared, are you?" Of course I wasn't going to say yes. So I pulled over and killed the headlights. The night went quiet, except for the ticking of the engine cooling down. We got out and walked onto the bridge. The steel groaned under our weight, echoing over the water below. There was graffiti everywhere. Names, dates, crude drawings, but some of it was strange. On the far side, someone had spray painted a single word in huge white letters: "Stay." Melissa ran her hand over it and laughed. "Maybe it's romantic, like stay with me." But the paint looked old, and underneath it, faintly, I could see another word that had been painted over. It looked like don't. Don't stay. We stood in the middle of the bridge for a while, looking down at the creek. It was barely moving, just black water reflecting the moon. Then Melissa said, "Do you hear that?" At first, I thought it was the wind, but then I heard it too, a faint metallic clink, clink, like metal tapping against metal. It was coming from under the bridge. I leaned over the edge, shining my phone's flashlight down. At first, it looked like a man standing on the rocks below, half in shadow. He was wearing overalls and what looked like a hard hat, his face hidden in the dark. He wasn't moving, just standing there. I called out, "Hey, you okay down there?" But he didn't respond. Then, slowly, he lifted his head. His face was pale, too pale, and his eyes caught the light like glass. He smiled, and even from that distance, I could tell it wasn't right. The smile was too wide, too flat. Melissa grabbed my arm. "Let's go." I didn't argue. We ran back toward the truck, the metal rattling under our feet. Halfway across, I looked back, and he was on the bridge, just standing there, maybe 30 feet away. No sound of footsteps, no climbing, just there. The fog was thicker now, swirling around him. I could see the outline of his face, the hard hat, and those eyes still reflecting light like animal eyes. I slammed the door, turned the key. Nothing. Dead engine. Melissa was crying now, saying my name over and over. The man was walking toward us, slow, steady steps echoing on the steel. Then the headlights flickered on by themselves. For just a second, I saw his face clearly. Sunken eyes, gray skin, mouth smeared dark like soot. Then the lights cut out again. When the truck finally started, I floored it in reverse. We didn't stop until we reached the main road. We called the sheriff when we got back into town, told him we'd seen someone out there. He just nodded and said, "Probably some drifter. Folks used to camp under that bridge." But later that night, my dad got a call from the same deputy. He said they went to check, and there were no footprints, no tire marks, nothing. Just the word "stay" painted fresh again, bright white, dripping. 2 weeks later, Melissa's family moved away. We talked a few times after that, but she always changed the subject if I brought up the bridge. I still drive past Old Mill Road sometimes. The bridge is blocked off now. The county fenced it up a few years back. But sometimes, when the fog's low and the moon's full, I swear I can see a light down by the creek, like a lantern swinging slowly in the dark. And if you roll your window down just for a second, you might hear it too, that faint metallic clink, clink, clink. I grew up in rural West Virginia, in a coal town that's mostly forgotten now. Half the houses are empty and the rest are falling apart. But when I was a kid, it was still alive, small, proud, and a little strange. There was an old road that cut through the mountains called Red Hollow Road. Folks said it got its name from the color of the dirt, clay so red it looked like blood when it rained. At the end of that road stood an abandoned church. White wooden walls, a leaning steeple, and broken stained glass windows that made the place look like it was bleeding light. People said no one had gone in there since 1957, when the last preacher, Reverend Cole, hung himself from the rafters during Sunday service. When I was 10, I didn't believe it, but by 17, I decided to find out. It was October of 1985, a week before Halloween. My cousin Ray and I rode out there on his dirt bikes, laughing about ghosts and curses. The air smelled like rain and rust. The church came into view around a bend, tall against the tree line. I remember thinking how quiet it was, not even birds. The door was hanging open, swinging slightly in the wind. We went inside. It smelled like old wood and mold. The pews were covered in dust. The altar still stood, though the cross above it had fallen, lying cracked on the floor. There was something carved into the wood at the front, dozens of names written by hand. Some were crossed out, others were fresh. I ran my hand over one. Raymond. "Hey," I said, "that's your name." Ray didn't answer. When I turned, he was standing at the entrance, staring up. "What?" I asked. He pointed. Hanging from the rafters, barely visible in the gloom, was a length of rope. We should have left then, but curiosity is a hell of a thing. We went up to the pulpit, and I noticed something strange. The Bible on the stand was open, but the pages were blank, completely white. Ray reached for it, and the instant his hand touched the cover, the door slammed shut. The sound echoed like thunder. Then came the whispering. It wasn't from one place, it was everywhere, behind us, above us, inside us. Words we couldn't make out, layered over each other fast and low. Ray dropped the book, and when it hit the floor, every page turned black at once. And then we heard the rope creak. We looked up. There was a figure hanging there now, swaying gently. A man, face pale, eyes open. He wasn't decayed or rotten, just fresh, like it had happened that morning. Ray screamed and bolted for the door, but it wouldn't budge. I pulled too, and it finally gave, but not before I heard the sound of something hitting the floor behind me. When I turned back, the rope was empty. We tore down the road like the devil himself was behind us. Ray wouldn't talk the whole ride home. When we finally stopped, he said something I'll never forget. He whispered my name. A month later, Ray was gone, found hanging in his family's barn. Same knot, same rope mark. The sheriff called it suicide, but when I went back to the church years later, boarded up now, overgrown, I saw something new carved into the wood. Michael. My name. I worked long-haul trucking for a few years after college, mostly nights, mostly alone. You start hearing things on the road when you drive that much. Weird radio chatter, static that sounds like words. But there's one night I can't forget. It was 2011, somewhere outside Kingman, Arizona. I'd been driving for 16 hours straight when I realized I'd taken a wrong turn. Ended up on a 2-lane desert road with no signs and no service. Around 2 a.m., the radio cut from static to a clear voice. Welcome back, travelers. You're listening to Station 113. I didn't touch the dial. My CB was off. The voice just came through my speakers, soft and calm, like an old radio host from the 50s. Then he said my name. I nearly ran off the road. I hadn't told anyone where I was going. There was no GPS on my rig back then and no signal out there. The voice kept talking about the desert, about lonely roads and lost souls. Then, after a pause, "Michael, you've been driving too long. Pull over, rest a while." I killed the radio, heart pounding. The silence afterward was worse. Then my headlights caught something on the side of the road. An old diner. Neon sign flickering. 113 Cafe. It looked abandoned. Parking lot empty, windows dusty, but the lights inside were on. I parked anyway. My head was swimming and maybe I just needed to stretch. When I walked in, there was a single man behind the counter, wearing a name tag that said Earl. He smiled like he'd been expecting me. "Coffee?" he asked. I nodded, sat down. The coffee was hot, too hot, and tasted like metal. Earl leaned on the counter. "You hear the station tonight?" I froze. He smiled wider. "You shouldn't have answered." When I looked down, the cup was empty. When I looked up again, the diner was dark. No lights, no Earl, just dust and silence. I ran outside, but the truck wasn't there. Just sand. Endless sand. Then, faintly, from somewhere in the distance, I heard the radio again. "Welcome back, travelers. You're listening to Station 113. They found my rig 3 days later, engine off, parked on the shoulder of Highway 93. The logbook said I'd been stopped there since 2:07 a.m., but the odometer showed I'd driven another 213 miles.